Hey everyone, and welcome. I'm so glad you could join me. Today, we're diving into a really vivid and honestly powerful passage from the Quran. It paints this incredible picture of the final day of accountability, a day of ultimate reckoning. So let's just jump right in.
So let me ask you something. Have you ever really thought about what justice looks like on a cosmic scale? I don't mean in a courtroom, but the real final deal. Well, the passage we're exploring today, from Surah Ash-Shu'ara, gives us a glimpse of exactly that. It's a scene from the Day of Judgment that's both pretty sobering and incredibly profound.
All right, so the scene opens up, and right away it establishes this massive, powerful contrast. There's really no middle ground here. The text shows us two very distinct groups, and each one is headed toward a very, very different final destination. On one side, you have the righteous, right? Those who were God-conscious. For them, paradise is brought near. And you gotta think, this is more than just about location. It's a huge gesture of honor, a promise being fulfilled right before their eyes. But then, on the other side, for the deviators, hellfire is brought forth. It's made visible, it's unavoidable. It's the stark reality of the path they decided to walk. Now, the text uses a specific word here, jahim, for hellfire. And the key isn't just the place, it's the action. It's being brought forth. This means that all the warnings people might have heard, maybe even brushed off in their lives, well, they're not just abstract ideas anymore. Suddenly, they've become a tangible, inescapable reality.
Okay, so once the two destinations are made crystal clear, the scene shifts. And this is where a really direct, really revealing confrontation begins for those who went astray.
The first question just cuts right to the bone. Imagine being asked this on the day when all truths are laid bare. It is, of course, a rhetorical question. It's designed to expose just how empty their old beliefs were. You know, where are they now? Those idols, those powers, that status you held so dear.
And then, bam, the follow-up question drives the point home with just devastating clarity. Can these false gods you worshipped actually help you now? Forget that. Can they even help themselves? This just highlights their complete and utter powerlessness. They can't save their followers, and they sure can't save themselves from what's coming.
So you see, the whole point of this questioning, it's not to get an answer. It's to force a confrontation with the truth. It's a moment of humiliation, really, designed to spark this deep, deep regret and just show the absolute futility of the path they chose. Then the scene shifts again, moving from questions to consequences. And here, divine justice is shown to be totally comprehensive. The punishment is shared by every single person who took part in the falsehood, from the top all the way down. And the sequence of events is incredibly symbolic. First up, the false gods themselves. They get flipped over and tossed into the fire, which just proves how powerless they always were. Then their worshippers follow right behind them. And finally, the armies of Iblis, or Satan, basically everyone who followed his path of rebellion, they're all gathered up and join them. It's a complete, total unification in destruction. You know what? This really shows us is that any kind of hierarchy or partnership that's built on a lie is absolutely meaningless in the end. The leader, the follower, the one who tempted them, they all end up in the exact same place. It's a stark message that those kinds of alliances only lead to one thing: collective ruin.
The story then takes us right inside the fire itself. And what's going on in there? Well, those old alliances have completely fallen apart. Instead of unity, there's just bitter arguments and blame being thrown around as they fight amongst themselves. And in the middle of all this fighting, a confession comes out. And irony is just, wow. They start by swearing by Allah, the very God they rejected their entire lives. They're now using his name to validate their own regret. It's stunning. And there it is, the climax of their confession. They finally pinpoint their exact catastrophic mistake. We made you equal with the Lord of the worlds. They finally admit that their fundamental error was taking created things, whether it was idols, power, or their own desires, and putting them on the same level as the creator of everything. Now, this massive error they're confessing to has a specific name in Islamic theology. And, understanding it is really the key to unlocking this whole passage. That core error is called shirk. It's considered the most serious sin because it's a direct violation of pure monotheism. And it's not just about worshiping statues made of stone. The sources explain it can be associating anything, wealth, status, ambition, even another person, as an equal to the one true God, the Lord of all worlds. So, when we boil it all down, what are the big takeaways from these verses? Well, first, divine justice is absolute. Second, any worship that isn't directed to the Creator is, in the end, completely futile. Third, the truth becomes undeniable for everyone, but when it's too late. And finally, the regret that comes with that realization is just immense, precisely because the time to turn back is over. Ultimately, the purpose of these verses is crystal clear. They're meant to be a powerful warning and a motivation for us. This story isn't just a picture of the end, it's a guide for us right now, a call to maintain a pure, direct relationship with God and to be really wary of all forms of idolatry, both the obvious ones and the subtle ones that can hide in our hearts. And that kind of leaves us with a final question to reflect on, doesn't it? In our modern world, which is filled with endless distractions and things to chase, what does it really mean to hold something equal to the divine? It's a powerful thought to sit with. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.